One moment. So officially, welcome everybody to the Austin Forum conversation. We're really excited to have you here. We have a lot of great people coming in for promoting equity in tech, with tech, and to tech. I'm going to be letting people in as I'm introducing. First, I want to, so my name is Jessica Sager. You might know me from other Austin Forums. I am now the discussion leader with the Austin Forum team and super excited about this opportunity to bring people together and have deep dives into the topics of the intersection of tech and society. And the first half, to give you a little bit of context. So these events are designed to have more discussion, more engagement, more conversation than our usual Austin Forums that might be in the library or just in a Zoom webinar. But we're going to use the first half, giving the panelists or discussion leaders an opportunity to introduce themselves first, and then introduce sort of an issue or they're setting the context. So the first 20 minutes of the conversation is going to be about setting context for the night, and then we'll open it up to questions, to engagement for everybody who's here to get to participate as well. So, but first, with just introductions, Michael, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Austin Forum, and all of the attendees. It's always a pleasure to engage and with like-minded individuals that really do care about similar content and similar challenges. So I'm Michael Ward Jr., President and CEO of Austin Urban Technology Movement. I sit on several different boards across Central Texas, but my focus really is around providing pathways for those that are underserved and underrepresented to get inside the tech industry, but then also survive and thrive once they are inside the tech industry. So I got my start inside the tech space working at Oracle. And I did not know anything about the tech industry until a recruiter tapped me on the shoulder my senior year in college, right? So I knew about PlayStation, I knew about computers, but I didn't know about the tech industry. I didn't know what a software developer did. I didn't know how internet access really plays a role into individuals having access to pathways, right? I didn't know about robotics and quantum computing and blockchain and everything that we know today, but I was still engaged in society. And now we're seeing the same thing just really manifested during this past pandemic. Is that right now, because individuals don't have access to the internet, because we're not teaching technology in our education system, we're at least not teaching it to scale. Now we're seeing a disconnect across the board, where now the actual tech companies don't have the workforce needed to fill the roles that they have in their companies. We're also seeing, governmental entities not have the employees or the infrastructure needed to support technological advances across our society, right? So because of a disconnect and us not doing the work the right way the first time, we're seeing so many challenges come in and seep into our ecosystem today. And now, through a lot of work that we realize, that we're trying to solve two main problems. Number one, increase diversity in tech. So making more sure that more Blacks and Hispanics are a part of the tech industry, because right now there are the two leading ethnicities or races at the end of the spectrum. And then number two, there's a skills demand needed inside of the tech industry overall. So even if you were to employ all the Caucasian, all the Hispanic, all the Black, all the Asian, everybody with all the skills and all the experience inside the tech industry, we will still have millions of jobs available, because not that many of us actually have the skills and experience and understanding to get inside the tech industry. So when we think about equity in tech, it's really about making sure that those individuals that have been left out of our society for quite some time can actually engage and participate and be active supporters and experts inside this booming industry that is now seeping into other sectors. So looking forward to the conversation. I know that Chelsea and Dave will deliver very well, and I look forward to being a part of it. So I'll hand it back off to you, Jessica.
Thank you. Yeah, fantastic. Chelsea, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Very glad to be here and humbled to be in this room. My name is Chelsea Collier. I'm the founder of Digi.city, which is a forum that looks at best practices and elevates speakers and a lot of the thought leaders around how technology can positively impact civic and social challenges. So obviously, equity is at the top of that list. It affects every single community, whether we're living in or connected to, not just in the US, but globally. And so I'm here to learn and listen to a lot of the work that you are doing, and your questions will inform different approaches about how I can connect with other leaders and showcase their best practices too. So I think this is going to be a lot of circular listening and talking, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it. Thanks.
We're thrilled to have you. Fantastic. And Dave.
Hi, Dave DeCaprio. I am the Chief Technology Officer and one of the co-founders of Closed Loop AI. So we're a Austin-based artificial intelligence startup that works in healthcare. I've got a few different angles for this discussion that are important to me. One of them is as an entrepreneur trying to build a company, I need to attract talent, and so I'm trying to figure out how to solve these problems from the side of how do I get a diverse, how do I solve these problems of getting a diverse workforce? And it's sort of especially important in the area I'm in, because much of our work is about, we deal with a lot of, we're in healthcare, we deal with a lot of Medicaid groups, and a lot of what we do is around making sure that the right people are getting the right resources using sort of our predictive modeling and techniques. And it's really important when you start using AI to make these kinds of decisions about who's going to get what resources, that you're building those systems. We have the problem of trying to make sure the systems we're building are also not biased and not perpetuating existing inequities, and trying to make sure that we're building, the team that's building those systems is also diverse, because that's, I feel an important part of all this is we can't build technology that's going to be inclusive without being inclusive in the people building the technology. That sounded kind of circular. It made sense in my head. Hopefully it made sense the way it came out.
I think it's right.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And as you can see, so we handpicked these speakers tonight because it looks at with diversity, equity in tech, with tech, through a bunch of different lenses, through the workforce development, through what are the best practices in smart city issues. So when technology meets community, meets cities, how is equity addressed or not addressed? And then through the creating of technology, through AI, how are diversity and equity issues addressed or not addressed through it? So I'm going to bring it back to Michael. If you'll all the speakers will have about 5 minutes, just as a gentle reminder, to share, just the state of the union, what you see, as the president and CEO of AUTUM, the Austin Urban Technology Movement, the state of the union, state of the union on diversity and tech equity issues in Austin and really beyond, because I know that you guys focus on Austin and you are tapped into what's happening in Texas and how it relates to things that are happening in the US and those issues. So if you'll give us a sort of a frame of what you see going on in those areas.
Sure, I touched on a little bit of this in the intro, and the main thing that I'll focus on is really just looking at what needs to be done to take care of the needs of our most vulnerable communities today. So whether those are Black and Hispanic because they're underserved, whether these are those that are low income, whether it's our students that are doing remote learning, whatever, even those that are in the rural community, right? So whatever bucket we want to frame, the challenge is really the same across the board. And what the challenge is that our community members today are unable to take care of their expenses today, given the significant cost of living, especially here in Central Texas / Austin, right? So if I want to localize and just talk about Austin, what we're seeing is that people are being pushed out the city because they can't afford to live here in Austin. Well, I'm not saying that technology is a solution for everything. However, if you looked at what happened last year, a lot of these individuals that were working inside the tech industry, well, they didn't lose their jobs, right? What they did, they just went and worked from home. However, if you are not as privileged to be a part of the tech industry, well, then for you, you may have lost your job. You may have lost your business. You may not have had the tools and resources to actually accommodate and live in today's society, given the changes in social distancing, right? Working online, right? Practicing being efficient if we can by leveraging the internet, to leveraging broadband, but that's not the case. That's not the same case for everyone across the board. So what we're seeing today is that there are disparities across our education system, across our workforce development system. And because of how much we depend on technology already, the fact that other people do not have access to technology is now creating a significant divide across opportunities. So now when it comes down to just applying for funding, if you do not have proper internet access, product connectivity, and just digital acumen, well, now you're not applying for funding to save your business, right? If you are a student who do not have a device, but you don't know that the form to fill out is online, well, now you can't fill out a form to get a device to continue working or to continue with your schoolwork, right? So now, because of the lack of access across, Austin, across Central Texas, because of the lack of adoption of internet access and devices, and because of the lack of affordability across Austin and Central Texas, what we're realizing now is that our students are being left behind. Our employers, just like Dave mentioned, is unable to find diverse talent because diverse talent isn't being exposed to the tech industry because they don't have access and resources. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg conversation where I see it as timeout. We need to take care of our families and take care of our adults today. If we actually take care of our adults, if we actually train and develop and transition them into the tech industry, no offense to any other industry, but I'm focusing on technology. If we transition them to the tech industry, well, then now it will seep down into the students, to the children, and we don't actually have to use federal funding and subsidies to provide devices and low income internet, right? Instead, the parents, the adults will actually have enough to stay here in Austin. They will actually have enough to take care of their expenses, and they will actually have enough to provide any device, any infrastructure, any internet that they would need for themselves or for their child going through K-12. So the main focus that I see from an equity standpoint in tech is that, we have done a disservice by our people. And right now it's impacting our economy and impacting our businesses that are trying to move fair as well. So I'll pause there and we'll have some more conversations later, but I'll stop there.
Sorry, my computer froze. Thank you, Michael. Now switching to give context from the smart city perspective. So that's very much from the workforce development. So from the smart city perspective, Chelsea, I'd love to hear what are some of the best practices you're seeing at the city level with smart cities in particular. So using technology to address issues around tech, around equity and diversity, because it's so multi-layered. So what are some of the best things that you're seeing that are getting you most excited about how people are engaging on the issue?
Yeah, one of the many things I appreciate about Michael is that he's a systems thinker. And so he's describing in his time all of the different systems that are both working and that are broken. And at the end of the day, a city or a community is just a series of systems. And so you look at tech hubs, Bay Area, San Jose, New York, Boston, Seattle, now Austin is this emerging tech hub. And you see that equity and affordability are colliding together and causing all of these issues. I think anyone who believes that there is a simple or a singular answer is either misinformed or not paying attention. And I think that the answer really lies in what we are doing here, which is pulling together collective community. And it's at the intersection of that community. So government, industry, academia, and the nonprofit and social sector all coming together, even though very different perspectives, to address a singular challenge that impacts everyone differently. If we don't do that, we will fail because we'll continue to do what we have been doing since the beginning of time, which is pointing the finger at another person, another organization, another sector, saying it's their job to figure this out. Guess what? It's not. It's our job to figure it out. It is my job to figure it out. It is your job to figure it out. And I think that this forum is the exact right place to do it. So how do we do that? Columbus, Ohio actually has launched a really interesting model called the Digital Equity Coalition. This is not government run. It is not industry run. It is a third party where all of these different groups come together and they have to give up control and they have to agree politically, and not just Republican or Democrat, but all of their different agendas, that they're going to focus on these priorities and these core issues. And they simplify it, not solving every problem, but seeing what they can do together. Another community that I love to brag on right down the road is San Antonio. So San Antonio does something that I think is really interesting. They use data to understand their current reality, and they've set up interlocal data sharing agreements within all of their different government entities to focus not just on what their individual department is doing. So it's not just transportation, it's not just city services, it's not just the water authority. It's all of them coming together to say, how can we serve the resident? So those of you who are design thinkers and, really focused on solving challenges through innovation and design thinking, this will seem very natural. But for government, this is not natural at all. And by the way, the city of San Antonio is also really good at saying, here's our piece of it, but we're going to extend out into the community in order to see how private sector solves these challenges and how we can all kind of come together. So I think between those two models, I think there's something there that we can emulate and that we can copy. And, I want to set the level and have a shared understanding, because I think a lot of times, especially in smart cities, which is a very hard to define topic, and I think there's a lot of lip service paid to technology, but nobody really gets real. It's important for me personally just to have some real conversation about what equity is all about. I believe that our nation was founded on racist and sexist ideals. And I know that's a hard thing to hear, and it's a hard thing to say, but liberty and justice was not designed for all. And so we're seeing the impact of these systems in our communities in a very real way. You just have to look down the road to I-35 and see how that bifurcates our community, and how racist and sexist policies have informed how our city is operating today. And I'm not blaming the city, I'm saying our collective community. And some of the issues that Michael outlined here are exactly the things that we're experiencing now. And so when you look at things like, it's all about access, right? Access to internet, access to wealth creation. The Federal Reserve just came out with their 2019 survey of consumer finances. And here's the reality. A white family has 8 times the wealth of an average Black family and 5 times that of Latino families. That is not an accident. And I just think we're going to have to really come together. We're going to have to pull different networks together. We are going to have to collectively say, this is our priority. And because it is in our best interest, in our community's best interest, we can use data to solve these problems in ways that we've never been able to do it before. And I think it is up to us to accept that it is our place to fix it, because it is our shared solution.
Absolutely. And going back to something that, yeah, exactly. I agree with Michael Snaps, is that everybody finding their place in it, and everybody finding the truth telling too, because if we can't actually acknowledge looking at it as a system and as the product of a system, and how are we using data, technology, analytics, all of these things to address this, if we don't tell the truth about it, what created it in the first place. So thank you so much, Chelsea. Dave. So Dave comes to the panel too from the, being a co-founder and chief technology officer of an AI company. I'd love to hear your take on it. I know, each of you guys have a very different take on the issue. So please share.
Yeah, I think, from Michael's view and Chelsea's view, the big problems that I see and am faced with are the role in working and building these AI systems. We are automating more and more decisions that get made, decisions about loans, decisions about who gets access to healthcare in particular is why I spend a lot of time thinking about. But they're also in the criminal justice system. There is more and more automation, and it's very important that as these systems get built, they don't by default remove these disparities. But the default things that happen is we're going to take the existing disparities that exist and we're going to embed them into the systems and then run those same biased policies at scale. And this has happened. There's a number of high profile examples of this happening. There was a big United Healthcare, is a giant company, and they were trying to figure out who to assign extra healthcare resources to. And the way they were doing that was by looking at people who were historically had very expensive healthcare costs. And it turns out those are the people with access to care, not the sickest people, the people with the most access to care. They tend to get the most care, which costs the most money. And so then they built systems to provide more access to care to those people who needed it the most. and that system was fundamentally biased because they defined needed it the most as having had prior access to use that care. And that was this very high profile example of, not thinking about any of these issues when building a system and perpetuating historical bias in a way that is really pernicious, because it is it happens automatically and at scale, and all of it. It's also very impersonal. The computer was making the decision, but the computer was simply reflecting the historical realities that it was learned on. There's an example of this, facial recognition software, and in criminal justice system, there's other examples of recidivism rates in the criminal justice system, where Black offenders the system was accurate at a certain level, but when it made mistakes, it tended to make mistakes assuming Black people would be higher future higher chance of committing a future criminal act than a white person. And that was all because of over-policing. You take all that over-policing data and then you train a system on it, and it's just going to learn to find those things. Facial recognition software is another example of, the systems were not trained on diverse sets. It's very simple. So they're not very good at recognizing. They're very good at recognizing white male faces, and the further away you get from that, the worse they get. And there were no regulations on these systems. They were used all over, and it's a big deal when a facial recognition system pops up somebody's picture, and then all of a sudden there's a criminal action taken on them. There's tons of examples of the wrong person getting picked. Those are all examples of building AI systems without taking these things into consideration, and ending up perpetuating disparities. And it is hard to remove those things in these systems. It's not trivial to sort of build these systems and wipe all that away and just say ignore that. They learn from the history. That's the way they work. And so if all of the historical data is biased, it's very hard to remove that. And it's something that it will not happen unless you explicitly go after it. So that's one of the things that we actually spend a lot of time on the technology side working on. And again, that ultimately the long-term solution has to involve getting more diversity in tech, so that we solve these problems and we think about them all throughout the development process. You can't, the way this has been addressed in tech is a lot of, let's build the system and then go check to see if it's biased. Well, the answer is always it's biased. Like, we've learned that. That's always the answer. So now you're at the end, and now you're stuck with something that you've got to go back and re-engineer. And really, these problems have to be solved earlier, and the only way to get them solved earlier is by getting diverse teams. And so that's, and how to get diverse teams. I mean, I can talk about that. That's a very difficult problem in tech right now. We're a small company. We're not a big company. We're a 30-person company in Austin. So we have limited resources ourselves to try to sort of develop our talent. We don't have a long time to, we don't always have visibility into the hiring we're going to make a year from now or 2 years from now, like a larger company would. So we're trying to figure out what are the things we can do as a smaller company where we have a little less visibility into what our future looks like, but still try to solve some of these problems.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm just my side note. I was working with a colleague on transcribing his collection of interviews of Black musicians in Austin, and realizing that there is a huge bias in AI against African-American vernacular English, that like the ability to transcribe it drops immensely immediately. Yep. Like, what?
All those systems were originally trained on the Wall Street Journal. And the farther you are from the Wall Street Journal, the worse it's going to be. It's all areas. The speech recognition in the my car doesn't understand my wife nearly as well as it understands me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm going to comment on. Is like one of my pet peeves is just how I engage with Alexa and Google Mini, right? Is that, depending on what I say, my quote unquote accent, right now, completely don't understand what I'm saying, right? But if my TV's playing, too loud near it, then it'll pick up everything the TV says, right? So I just think that's just so funny when you see the differences between just what the system is able to digest, but then at the same time, when you look at the options, right? So for example, we could talk about the iPhone. You could just hear that you can, I think right now you have 3 options for Siri, right? You could choose Siri, I think it's American, Australia, maybe like Britain, if I'm not mistaken. However, if I'm not mistaken, I believe we have about like what, over 200 countries. So like, why are there only 3 options that I have for an application from a certain country or from where that person's from, when we know there's so many more countries right there, right? So that just shows the simple mindset the person had creating that application when we know there's so many options that can be. And that's just like one example, but Dave, everything you stated just from an AI and product is like, yeah, if we're creating biased products, it's going to just seep into all the decisions. And that is now significantly impacting the people, because when we create these biased products, those that are mostly impacted are the ones that are either low income, Black and Hispanic, don't have the resources, out of touch. So it's, it's okay if they are the ones who are being negatively impacted, because the majority of the people that are impacted, well, they have the funds to do so if they're able to do that in that regard, right? So that's where we see just the disconnect based off who actually have and who doesn't when it comes down to who will be impacted by any type of inequitable or biased product that's been created.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, this is the part where I want to open. We have a lot of brilliant people who are also here. And as Chelsea said in meeting, like wanting this to be a time of asking questions and listening. So I'd love to hear too, whether from people who spoke up at the beginning or from others, an opportunity to introduce yourself and what questions do you have, or what are the things that you're dealing with around this issue?
Dave, I just wanted to say, I'm Heather Bishop. I'm the incoming managing director of the Austin Forum. I just wanted to say how comforting it was actually just to hear you talk about the AI issue. I have an account on a particular social media site, does not have my name, my gender, my ethnic background, and it's not in English. However, the volume of completely inappropriate content that comes up in the feed, it doesn't happen to be Facebook, is shocking. And I actually contacted them and said, hey, there seems to be an issue here. I don't even have any of my personal information on here. And you show me these things that are really not related to anything. You've asked me what I'm interested in, and I've shown you, and I'm not even speaking English. And you're showing me these things. There seems to be something. Can you help me understand what's happening here? There seems to be a problem with your algorithm or something. And their response was incredibly unprofessional. They actually said, if you think that we're racially biasing you, we're not. And blah, blah. I mean, it was so defensive. And I was like, actually, I didn't even bring that up. I was just trying to figure out what was happening, but thanks. And I just sort of left it alone. And over the several years, it just continues. And as such, I just don't let any friends or family or anyone I know use the site. I don't recommend it for anyone, but it feels good to sort of hear what I've kind of known and suspected was going along all the time. It feels good to have someone acknowledge that this really is a very serious issue, and it's something that people are aware of and are thinking about.
Yeah, it is. And I think the important thing for the tech community to understand is it's like many of these issues, like ignoring it, like pretending it's not that they built bias into the system, is that the mechanism used to build these systems inherently is going to replicate all the existing biases that exist. And so if you don't, it's a problem where if you don't actively attempt to solve it, it's going to be bad, and it will get worse as more and more things get automated. So
that just makes sense. I was just trying to understand what was happening, and they were violently or vehemently aggressive and defensive. And I was like, wow, I wasn't even starting with that. But at least I know you seem to be aware there's a problem. Thank you. I won't ask again. Thanks.
They have something to hide.
That defensiveness.
It's really the Project Alamo came here from Texas, and they acted as corporate, political, and special interest sponsor trolls. That's a concern because Facebook, Cambridge Analytical data, it came as a scandal, and there was involvement, a lot of involvement here from Texas. So, you know, if you have Ted Cruz paying money into a campaign, and this is going into the funding, and that was with also Trump. Project Alamo here in Texas is violating the Fourth Amendment, really. They're going through the Analytica, and they're working actually through, an ex-staffer said, through the Brexit group. This is media manipulation from people who are campaigning. So this is, we need, Heather Bishop, we need to have vigilance here for democracy. Otherwise, it's a fall for an autocracy through a technology, kleptocracy through manipulation of the media. And again, it's a scandal from a couple of years ago. We're still not maturing as a city, state, and nation to our technologies. What China and Russia, the way they utilize technology on their citizens, and
David,
the way we are.
David, thank you.
Yes.
And I think, no, I'm just going to slow because I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak and ask questions. I think something that Michael had said too in one of our conversations, Michael, is also, and I think it's an important piece, is like, going to pivot a little, David, but I hear and appreciate how impassioned you are on this, is also like the policy side of this. You know, how are, you know, Chelsea goes back also to the foundation, but also how are our policies, how is their funding for addressing diversity and technology and the infrastructure side and things like that. Chelsea, I'm curious to see too, this goes back to a conversation Michael and I had too when we were setting the context for this. Are you seeing, you know, there's a lot of federal from policy, there's a lot of federal dollars being pushed into this area. And I'm curious, Michael, Chelsea, are you seeing things that are happening? Are you hoping that how that will, what impact that might have?
I'm seeing a lot of activity, which is positive. So celebrating this, a lot of times it's around individual human resources. So an organization, whether it's a city or, you know, a quasi-government entity, will hire a DEI officer or say this person is now in charge of making sure that our policies are equitable and all those things. Celebrating that, yes, that is one step out of maybe 100. And again, I think if we can collectively as a community come together and demand policies that are not just in one sector, but across sectors, I fundamentally believe that's the only way we're going to make progress that isn't just iterative.
Absolutely. Mia, I see your hand raised, please. And please introduce yourself too when people are speaking up, because we love to get to know who's joining us.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mia White, and I just came on to this meeting because I was checking my emails and I saw a newsletter from the Autumn Group. I think I'm maybe a member. I just signed up like maybe last week. I'm currently a workers' compensation minister, and I'm handling claims for the University of Texas system. I'm going to try to make it short. My reasoning to want to get into the tech industry, this is something I should have probably done years ago, as I'm like now 40. I'm tired of insurance. I'm tired of handling claims, and I wanted to try to get into something new, maybe into the career of IT cybersecurity. And I was hoping to maybe try to get some education without having to go back to school and further get myself into college debt with student loans and things like that. But I just wanted to piggyback off of the gentleman that has like this small startup group when he was saying about the artificial intelligence and how, you know, the coding and stuff is being set up. Question is, there are human beings that are creating the artificial intelligence for these computers to run. So my thing is, if these are human beings that are creating these codings, there's got to be also inherent bias that these human beings may have internally, therefore writing the codes to set up your artificial intelligence, right? And if so, what can you do to change that? Do you try to hire different people that don't have biases? And it's kind of difficult, to determine that with every human being, because some human beings going to have some type of inherent bias about somebody or something anyway. So how can you change that, mitigate that, or do something to fix it or remedy it?
Really great question, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, so the first thing the suggestion you had is absolutely, I think, the strongest one, is make sure you get a diverse team. I think it's tough to hire a team where nobody has any biases. I think the best you can hope to do is hire a diverse team where hopefully you get a lot of different points of view and those kind of cancel out. The other thing is there's a lot of this is just making sure it gets talked about. It's not like people are coding in and, hey, if somebody's Black, then I want to let's lower their score. It's simply the way these systems are built. They take large piles of data and they look at what happens in those data and they say, oh, it looks like Black people have lower access to care. I guess that's the way things are supposed to be. And if you don't, it's a matter of having the discussion early in the process where you can identify those biases and you can say, we know this is a problem. We know access to care is a problem. And so let's try to correct for that in our data. Let's look for things that, examples, there are ways you can build these systems where looking at cost is a horrible measure, because the same procedure in a different part of the country or in a different neighborhood or in a different hospital will cost vastly different amounts of money. But if instead you train that system to look at more detail at what actually happened, not how much it cost, but what actually happened. So if you look at the rates, instead of looking at the cost of childbirth, for example, if you look at the rates of complication of childbirth, then everything switches and you get something that's more accurate. And so it's about having the discussion early and during the development of these systems. And I think we mentioned policy somewhere in here, and I think that has to be a piece of it. There are a lot of companies in the tech industry, and it's a very competitive industry, and trying to get everybody to just do the right thing is not the best solution all the time. I think there's a lot of people who want to do the right thing, and having policies and regulations that guide them and make it a little level the competitive playing field, I think is a great idea. So that if everybody has to pay attention to these issues because it's regulated, then I think that can help start those discussions earlier, and we can start to do it. It's not as simple a problem as like, oh, if all the coders weren't biased, then the problem solves itself. It's trickier.
It's not going to be like an easy problem to remedy or solution. And then even piggyback off of what you just said about healthcare and the cost being slightly or vastly different between cities, counties, towns, states, and things like that. But I've always wondered too, is the cost of healthcare significantly different for those of Caucasian hue versus those of a darker hue? I've always, wanted to think about
Absolutely.
that. Is there also a possibility behind that too, that regular normal people were not aware of?
It's not just cost, it's access. And I love, Dave, your situation or your suggestion, because the question that I'm inspired, and I don't know the answer to, maybe somebody can help us all figure it out, is how do we incentivize everyone to have a lens on equity and inclusion? So you're motivated because not only is it the right thing to do to be a decent human being in the world, but the outcomes are better, the products are better, the market uptake is better, the saturation of whatever you're trying to accomplish is better and more readily accepted because you have done the work to say, how does this affect vulnerable communities? How does this affect people of color? How does this affect women? How does this affect insert demographic here? I think if we could figure the answer out to that question, we could be getting somewhere.
What I hear in that too is becoming really conscious of how we're thinking and like what questions are the questions that need to be asked too. Because if we're learning to ask new questions now that weren't questions that we didn't have before. So really great. I want to, if it's okay, Mia, I also want to let Jessica share too. Do you feel like you got your question answered, or at least?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't want to take over the
No,
meeting or anything
there's
like
no
that.
taking over.
There's just a couple things that was floating up here that I wanted
I
to,
love it. No,
out, so.
We're thrilled to have you here, and absolutely, perfect. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Hi, y'all. I have so many things to say. I'm so excited about this discussion. Mia, we need to contact each other, because if you're looking to make a career change, this is something Workforce Solutions might be able to help you with, and at little or no cost to you. But also, I have a couple of different things also, like you said, that are brewing up here. One of the things is there is no way to hire a whole workforce that is not biased. I think the most that you can hope for is hiring a workforce that is aware of their bias. And so a lot of training about identifying what that bias is, and an open and trusting environment where you can talk through it, how to overcome it. And then another thing is, we're talking about hiring this workforce that will then inform a more diverse or a better product, a more substantial, impactful product for the community. How do you get that diverse workforce is a whole other thing. I mentioned in the chat, there are so many companies that are leveraging AI to hire, and that in itself can be a problem just because of the amount of very capable people who don't even make it to the hiring manager's desk because of this AI platform that's farming folks out. So I do have a question, I promise. My question is for all three of you and anybody else who wants to jump in as well. I'm really interested in maybe what the top 2 or 3 best practices are that you have either implemented in your tech company or seen implemented in the industry as a whole, or specific tech companies, to overcome that hiring bias. One of the tech leaders that we were talking to mentioned that she is actively training her hiring managers to look for applicants who sound nothing like them. So they're having open conversations about making sure that you are inviting folks to interview who are completely different from yourself. If anybody has some of those best practices and how you implemented them, I would love to hear it.
So I could comment from several different perspectives. So the first thing that I'll say is the reason why we're having such a challenge right now around hiring diverse talent is because we've never put in the work to fully invest in our education system and have a robust curriculum that encompasses technology, science, math, engineering, finance, right? Civic engagement, everything that we should be focusing on today, in our life, right? Food insecurity, right? Wellness, healthcare, literally everything. What we really should be focusing on isn't a part of our education system. And because of that, now we're trying to really shift the focus and lean more on employers in order to provide that support and that assistance. However, not all employers have the same funding, same bandwidth, same team, right? So there's a disconnect in what the employers can actually do. So as I look at the entire landscape and I look at, what are the top 2-3 things that's needed to actually get past the implicit bias, is to completely change the bias, the process. So I don't recall who said it, but number one, don't submit applications through an AI, but instead just interview people in general and just see if they'll be a good fit, right? Don't take from the top 10% of schools and create more barriers, just interview everyone, right? So now if you just remove the barriers and actually focus on developing talent, well, then you will have your own source of talent you can pull from. So mind you, I know we're having a very difficult conversation kind of to reshape how we think and how we actually go about recruiting today. But if we actually do this right, well, then employers wouldn't be hiring or trying to hire people that are adults, right? Employers will actually be engaged from the earlier process from middle school, high school, and college. So they would already know this people that they're going to be hiring from the beginning. So by the time they do graduate from any type of post-secondary or program, they have their applicants that they're going to work with. So because we don't have that process outlined right now, right, we're trying to do this kind of retroactively. That's where the issue comes into play, because finding talent to me is very easy. We have a workforce development training program. We have several people who want to get trained. So the people isn't the problem, right? The people are there, they're willing, they're able. The challenge is finding the right employer that actually have the privilege, the funding, the resources to invest in developing that person to take them on board. And if you're looking for someone to not be developed, but get hired right now, well, then you're completely eliminating the startups that don't have the time to develop and train someone who can't come in and be a rock star, right? Like they have their funders, they have the things that that they need to hit. So they can't be focusing so much on workforce development because they need a salesperson to come and scale this program, right? They need a software developer to come and build this amazing product. So if you eliminate the startups and you eliminate the small and medium businesses that don't have ERGs or employee resource groups or a diversity, equity, inclusion department, then you're really focused on the large companies, and the large companies are like Titanics. They move so slow. So because they move so slow, they're stuck in their ways. They're going to continue to recruit from the colleges and universities. They're not going to fully invest or value the community colleges and their programs that are focusing on workforce development. They're not going to fully invest in K through 12, so they can actually eliminate the people that aren't interested, but get to them sooner and younger and earlier, right? Like there are several different things that we need to do. But the real solution that I see is that we need to get away from just interviewing the top 10%, the top 5%. And we need employers and our institutions to say, hey, we need to train and develop the community. So it doesn't matter if this person's a rock star or not, that's irrelevant. We're gonna train that person. So whatever that person needs, we're gonna give them that additional support. So if that person is passionate about healthcare, great, let's connect them with technology in the healthcare industry so they can go and be the best experts inside technology for healthcare. If they want to do food, great, let's get them impacted around technology for agriculture and make them follow their passions that way, right? Let's just remove the qualification, the barriers as to why someone should get an internship, why someone should get a program, and just think about, let's just develop our community by leveraging the resources that are here and bring employers together versus making them think that like they're going to be the only ones to get talent. It's saying, no, we're all in this together to make sure we all get talent. And it doesn't matter who we get, because the end user is going to be an expert in what they do, because we're all here making sure this person becomes an expert in what they do. So that's my response on that.
And Michael, when those systems are developed the way that you're describing, anyone in that pipeline, whether you're an employer looking for talent, whether you're a person looking to switch industries and want to get into tech, whether you're just curious, whether you're a nonprofit solving community challenges, whether you're a startup employer looking to scale, whatever it is, you should be able to say, I can go here and get my needs met, or I can go here and at least get on the pathway to going through the journey. And it might be more work than I anticipated, but at least I have the information to do that. And I think what we're missing right now, both in Austin and many communities nationwide, is that definition of that pathway. It's the definition of the roadmap. It's the, here's who I am, here's what I need, how do I plug in, what do I do? And again, I think a lot of people look to government to solve that, and they're not going to do it. Surprise, because they haven't. Maybe it's not because they don't want to, but because it's too daunting of a task. So I would love to see Austin form a cross-sector task force, and it can begin with 10 people and start to outline this. And maybe it's already been done and we just don't know about it. Then our job becomes, how do we spread the word, and how do we, kind of outline this power strip so people can plug in?
So what I want to comment on that, Chelsea, is that I 100% agree with what you're bringing up just from a policy standpoint, really engaging with our communities, because you're right? Like these issues aren't new, right? These issues have been here year over year. And I believe someone mentioned about about SB5, which I would love to talk about that when we get to that. But right now, just based on our system today, we need everybody to play a role and be able to really move things forward. And if we don't do that, then we're going to see the disconnect just continue to happen over and over and over again. So, I mean, Chelsea, we could definitely talk about creating that task force of what's been done, because, you know, you and I love to do research and just amplify what's already been done versus reinvent the wheel. So.
Totally.
Yeah. I just want to respond to Jessica's comment. There's a couple small things we've done that I feel like, you know, in the grand scheme of things, we may not be solving the problem, but one thing I can do as a startup is just let everybody know that this is an important issue in hiring. And you let them know up front that, hey, we're looking, like, one of our goals in hiring is to build a diverse workforce here. And the other is following up with them. Just how are you doing? Like, how are we doing on diversity in your recruiting? Like, what's the candidate pool like? Have we done anything on minority candidates? What can we do? A lot of times, you know, and sometimes the answer is, I don't have any, you know, I don't have any minority candidates for this position so far, but like at least asking for every position, like that's one of the things that we try to do to get started. And the other is to think about, the other small thing we do is thinking about the job qualifications. And just, you know, I think there's a lot of typical, this is a discussion I had with someone, I can't remember when, but I said, oh, everybody kind of always overstates the job qualifications. And somebody pointed out to me that, well, you know that, but not everybody knows that. And so we did go back, you know, and like 5 years of experience. And, you know, some people who maybe grew up privileged know that it says 5 years of experience. They've only been doing it for a year. That's fine. But, you know, so we went back and said, hey, like, are we actually saying what the requirements are? Or is there some kind of code that you have to know about? Well, 5 years doesn't really mean 5 years. 5 years really means you've been doing it for a year. And if you don't know that, now you're going to disqualify yourself. So it's like, I don't know. These are hard problems. And I feel like these are like tiny drops in the bucket, but maybe they're better than doing nothing.
Yeah, but it's not small. I mean, it's accountability and transparency. And that's exactly what we all need to do. And, you know, I know we're getting close to time, Jessica, but I just wanted to say, you know, outside of the tech conversation, we as consumers are powerful. And sometimes I feel a little bit limited in terms of, oh God, what can I do? These problems seem so insurmountable. Look at who's on the board of directors of where you bank. Just that tiny little decision. If it's all one gender and it's all one race or ethnicity, there's a problem. So just think about how you spend your money and where you put your time, and look at the leadership of those companies, and that can help change the world in one tiny little way, one person at a time.
Chelsea, will you tell me where you bank though? Because I'm definitely clear that now I'm probably gonna have to change banks after that comment.
In Austin, Texas. Yes, they have a very diverse board, or at least more diverse than a lot of the others that I saw. So
okay, fantastic.
So Jessica, can I comment on SB5 just about the Broadband Development Office?
Yeah,
I believe
and then we'll have that be our last big thing. I know now I'm realizing I'm like, we should have scheduled more time. This is such a rich conversation. There's so many things. But yes, Michael, please comment on that and then we'll do quick wrap.
Sure, and I'm curious what Chelsea will say about it as well. So long story short, yes, I do agree that some, not all, some of the findings were the same as the findings we knew about for years, right? The barriers were the three that I mentioned earlier: access, adoption, and affordability. So it doesn't matter if you're rural or if you're urban, those are the same three challenges, and those will always be the same three challenges. So from a study standpoint, right, that could have been streamlined by using historical data, and I've always stated that. And now the development of a broadband office, that is definitely needed for the state of Texas. The development of a strategic plan on digital inclusion and broadband expansion is definitely needed for the state of Texas. The challenge, though, however, is the deregulation of Texas. So when you're trying to do a regional plan, but all counties and cities and state or locals act independent of each other, it's very difficult to get on the same consensus of an actual strategy and plan because everyone has different access points. And if you're rural or urban, you believe your challenges are different and not related. So that's why that's one of the reasons I believe why it's taken us so long to actually create a office or a strategy plan. But I'm happy that we are actually moving in that direction. Do I believe that we can go faster? Yes, but unfortunately that's government, and government can only go so fast, which is why I'm a huge supporter in private-public partnerships, right? So where the public starts to slow down, the private entities can come with a little bit of urgency, a little bit more push, and same thing with nonprofits that kind of play in the middle realm there. So those are the updates that I share. And I think that answers your questions, but if you ever want to talk about it, feel free to reach out to me online. Chelsea, not sure if you wanted to add anything else around SB5, what's going on that front.
I think that needs its own special category. I saw some goals came out on the statewide level today about access up and down and what that means for, kind of, what is it, 4 to 10-year goals. So there's a lot of conversation there, but we might have to wait for another time.
This has been a really fantastic discussion. Mark, thanks for joining us as an IT manager from UT. I know that I think over 30 people joined for this conversation and clearly did not schedule enough time. But I just want to thank you. I want to thank Michael and Chelsea and Dave for joining us, Mia and Jessica and Heather and David and Carl and all the names I'm seeing, Dom, Patricia, Mark, Joshua, everybody who joined us, everybody who spoke. There is a lot to truth telling to be had for us to engage, be willing to show up for these conversations, look at those things we can do. What Dave said too, of changing what we're asking for in the job application from 5 years to 1 year, because we realize we're actually only asking for one thing. There's micro steps and macro steps that we all can participate in. So please, we invite people to take them on. That is a theme that I heard too, is that, acknowledging it, coming together, cross collaboration, working together on this, and that, to address the issues through technology, we really need to make technology more diverse by bringing them in. Please, we have a great Slack channel with plus 1,000 people from across the world. Actually, we can continue conversations there. I know this was just a little bit for a Tuesday evening, but thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Austin Forum, Jay and Heather, for hosting this. And I hope, all the things that go into chat, will be recorded. Please, if there's things that you want to follow up, put it in our Slack channel so that people can follow up. Big resources, actually, really quick, last words will be your best resource that you would recommend. My best resource on these issues, I would say, check out Austin Urban Technology Movement. And if you haven't seen it, please check that out. That's my resource. Michael, Chelsea, Dave, any favorite resources or places to point people?
I'll go first. I can't limit to just one, sorry. Div Inc., Latin TX, Founders and Funders, Code to College, EGBI, the New Philanthropists, and any equity cohort at the government level. Please look into their work, support them. They are doing the important work in our community.
Beautiful. Dave, I'll let Michael close it up with his recommendations. Dave, any recommendations, future reading, things people should point people to?
I'll say Chelsea's list sounded great, and that was a lot. So let's just stick with that one.
Okay.
It'll take you a while to get through.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely pub everything that Chelsea said, and every entity that Chelsea said. It definitely pub Workforce Solutions Capital Area. They're one of our biggest partners, and of course, Austin Urban Technology Movement. We're a one-stop shop for everything related to tech. So come holler at us and we'll talk.
Awesome.
Have a good one.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful evening. Take care. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.